This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
The AFC for the past 3 to 4 years has been considered the far superior conference in the NFL.
I'm going to say that AFC is the toughest road traveled.
Team.
I just think that collectively speaking, when you look at the talent in the AFC,
and I look at the quarterbacks.
Quarterbacks
Something
especially,
about the QBs.
I just think it's different. I just think it's on a different level.
And I mean, how could you blame anyone for thinking that, especially when they have stars from the bloodbath of the AFC North with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow to the rising superstars in the AFC South in CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Trevor Lawrence. I mean, the AFC truly does have it all. So I thought, what better way to prep for the season than going through all the divisions in one video? This is the entire AFC explained. The Ravens, Browns, Bengals, and Steelers all absolutely despise each other, producing some of the most vicious clashes every single year. Since 2020, the AFC North has been the only division in football where all 4 teams have winning records, and each team has made the playoffs at least twice in that span. And with the season right around the corner, they're all going to be backing themselves to make it back into the playoffs in 2024. And in today's video, we're going to go over the entire division and why it is such a bloodbath of a division, who has the best roster coming into the season, and at the end of the video, I'm going to give a prediction of who I think will win the AFC North. Now, starting with the Baltimore Ravens, they went all the way to the AFC Championship game last year on the backs of MVP Lamar Jackson, All-Pro linebacker Roquan Smith, and standout performers from young guys like Zay Flowers and Justin Matabuki. The problem is, though, is that they showed a lot of flaws against the Kansas City Chiefs in that AFC Championship game. And not only that, but also in free agency, they lost a ton of guys on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball as well. Add in the fact that they also lost a coordinator in Mike McDonald to the Seattle Seahawks this season, it truly begs the question of what can we expect this year from the Baltimore Ravens. And well, we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball to start this conversation, but Lamar Jackson, as we know, the guy looks as good as ever. After his MVP year, he has come into the preseason slimmed down, looking to go back to utilizing his speed on top of his newly found arm. This is exciting news for the Ravens too, and Lamar Jackson, who has literally a new running mate in the backfield with him. As we all know, Baltimore signed Titans legend Derrick Henry as he attempts to finally win a ring, arguably forming the best quarterback running back duo in the league.
They have a guy that, I mean, if they had a running back like this.
Jamal Lewis?
Jamal Lewis.
Yeah.
Okay, Jamal Lewis, they won a Super Bowl with. And Derrick Henry is going to be inspired. This is a team that made a run to try to get Derrick Henry last year before Tennessee wouldn't trade him to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Baltimore went after him again in free agency, brought him in, and now let's see what the combination of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry can do.
One of the coolest.
On top of that, the Ravens receiving core is the best it's been in the Lamar era, with Zay Flowers ready to break out, Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar offering useful veteran support, and Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely forming a formidable tight end duo. Finally, the biggest offensive concern for me, honestly, is just their offensive line. Losing Morgan Moses, Kevin Zeitler, and John Simpson just stings for sure, but their replacements look pretty good. Andrew Voorhees was a top 3 guard in the 2023 draft before tearing his ACL and slipping into day 3, and he's fully healthy after a year of coaching and conditioning in the system. Roger Rosengarten was a steal in the 3rd round of this year's draft, to the point that he's challenging to be the day 1 starter already. The rest of the line is filled with Pro Bowl center Tyler Lindenbaum and All-Pro right tackle Ronnie Staley with a contested spot at right guard. Finally, offensive coordinator Todd Monken washed the stink of Greg Roman out of Baltimore, and they looked electric again in 2023. Monken didn't go anywhere, so overall it looks like the Ravens will be back to top form with a younger, healthier offense sooner rather than later. On the defensive side of the ball, the question's pretty simple, is can they survive without Mike McDonald as that defensive coordinator now? And so far, by the looks, it looks like the answer is yes. The Ravens defense under new defensive coordinator Zach Orr, a McDonald disciple, has been extremely solid in training camp, with younger guys like 2024 first rounder Nate Wiggins and linebacker Trent Simpson stepping up to fill the gaps along battle-tested veterans like Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith. Those two veterans are the key, the leaders of the best defensive unit in football last year, who should, alongside Orr, be able to replicate much of their past success. So what will the Ravens look like in 2024 is the big question now. And well, for me, I honestly see them getting to that peak win range of like 14 or 15 wins, pretty much able to replicate what they did last year in the NFL. Like, I mean, their roster and their scheme can beat anybody in football, and outside of Patrick Mahomes, they might have the 2nd best quarterback in the league. Somehow, I mean, the dude was ranked ahead of Patrick Mahomes in the NFL top 100, even though I don't know how Patrick Mahomes wasn't number one, but that's a whole different conversation. But nonetheless, Lamar Jackson is an amazing football player who is just as good as Patrick Mahomes, even though he doesn't have that playoff credibility yet. On their floor, though, there are cracks in this offensive and defensive unit for sure. But I mean, the only really big concern I have is that their schedule is absolutely grueling when we look at it, especially early, which could put them behind the 8 ball if they do start slow. And I mean, look, the division isn't getting any weaker, as we'll see in the rest of this video, but I put the floor of Baltimore at like 10 wins, regardless of the defending champs. They can expect to be in the mix at the end of the season, and at their best, they're still big-time Super Bowl contenders. Now to the comeback story, though. The Cincinnati Bengals had a rough 2023, and some of that bad energy had affected their offseason. That being said, the rumors of their demise have been greatly exaggerated by the public. They moved on from an offensive coordinator who arguably shackled Joe Burrow when he was starting, and they upgraded in a lot of their key spots. They do have a couple of key concerns, which we'll get to, but it seems like if they stay healthy, the Bengals will be a superpower once again. Now, of course, we have to start with Joe Burrow because, I mean, the dude should probably be a favorite to win an MVP this season. I mean, to me, it looks like voter fatigue is maybe setting in on Mahomes and Lamar, and Burrow, when healthy, has been a superpower with his arm and pocket presence. With the arrival of first-round rookie Amarius Mims from Georgia, Burrow finally has the protection he needs to stay clean and healthy. Hey guys, post edit K-Rich coming back to you guys right now. I did see that Amarius Mims just got injured actually, so he's going to be out for several weeks with a pectoral strain. So hopefully this won't affect Joe Burrow too much, but I just wanted to hop back in the video and say that I did see that. So hopefully he will recover soon, but once he does, that hopefully will help this offensive line protect Joe, and we'll kind of see what he can do this year. On top of that, the loss of Joe Mixon hasn't stood out at all thanks to the signing of Zach Moss, who showed amazing ability as a starter spot with the Colts last year. With him in front of speedster Chase Brown and rookie Trayvon Williams, the Bengals rushing attack seems more alive than ever. And then of course we get to the pass catchers, the absolute bread and butter of this revamped Bengals squad. Jamar Chase is about to absolutely break the bank to match his former LSU teammate over in Minnesota, and while T. Higgins might not be retained long term, he has at least one more year to try and get a ring in Cincy. And to add to that, we have Mike Gesicki at tight end, and the Bengals' odd ability to turn day 3 receivers into touchdown machines like Andre Avasavi and Trenton Irwin, and there isn't really a flaw in the Bengals offense. New offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher has been with the organization since their Super Bowl run as Burrow's quarterback coach and should help Joe get the most out of his talents. As for the defensive side of the ball, the Bengals may have the weakest defense inside of this tough division. But as crazy as it sounds, at the same time, they can also manage to be like a top 15 unit with this defensive unit that they have put together. I think a lot of people did forget this, but Trey Hendrickson did request a trade like T. Higgins, but hasn't shown signs of a true holdout, so he should be good to go, and most of their other impact players are sticking around. Logan Wilson, Sam Hubbard, and DJ Turner led the veterans, while young guys like Miles Murphy, Dax Hill, and Chris Jenkins try to prove themselves and contribute. They also signed Sheldon Rankins as a veteran D-line presence after he was electric with the Texans, and poached safety Geno Stone from the Ravens after he was a total ball hawk in Baltimore. And I mean, when we're taking a look at the ceiling and the floor for this Bengals team, honestly, it all rides on Joe Burrow and how good he's going to play. Like, I mean, the Jake Browning experience last year, that showed their true ceiling with a decent backup, if you want to call him that. But if they want another real run at a Super Bowl, then they have one mission: keep Joe Burrow healthy. And I mean, honestly, if he does stay healthy, then the following should happen: is that they should at least have a ceiling, if not higher, of like 12 or 13 wins. Like, that's how good this team should be if Joe Burrow can stay healthy. They do have the worst record against their own division of teams we're looking at today, and their schedule is no joke, with opponents like the Eagles, Chargers, and Chiefs all coming before their bye week. Because of those concerns and lingering questions about Joe Burrow's durability, their floor this year is a carbon copy of last season, 9-8. For me, honestly, I do see, again, if the Bengals can stay healthy, they're going to achieve that ceiling more likely than not, and honestly probably surpass that win total if they can. But again, it all comes down to Joe Burrow and can they keep him healthy? Because if they can, then they will be legit threats in the AFC North this year. Are you looking for a new book this football season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest and easiest payouts in the industry, along with 24/7 personalized service 365 days a year. Not only that, but they have live wagering on all major games, so if you see something mid-game and want to make a wager on it, you can. And the best part is you get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And now look, you guys know I had to come through for you, so use my sign up link in the description or pinned comment and get a sign up bonus of 125% up to $2,000. Again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, but for now, let's hop back into it. Now, as we move on to the Cleveland Browns, they have the exact problem to that of the two teams I've ranked ahead of them. We know their defense is going to be good. We don't have any coaching questions, and their offensive line is far and away the best in the AFC North. But under center, they have one of the biggest question marks in the entire league. So let's find out why the Browns, I personally do think, have the widest range of outcomes.
Cleveland has as good a roster as anybody in that conference. Maybe Houston and Kansas City have better. Cleveland has a defensive line that has a defensive player of the year and a dude opposite him in Za'Darius that is unreal. They have good young linebackers. They have a secondary that can go with anybody in ball. They had the #1 defense in football last year. They have a coach that is a 2-time coach of the year. There hasn't been that many humans on the planet that have done that. They still have an offensive line that is top 5 in ball.
Offensively, all the Browns needed to do is be average. Unfortunately, in 2023, we saw the early loss of Deshaun Watson to injury, giving way to a long line of backups and emergency signings. I mean, even before that injury, though, Watson was far from his 2019 self. The Browns did get lucky, though, and Joe Flacco had one more legacy run in him to get them to the playoffs, but now Flacco is backing up Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. There aren't many things I can say that are great about the Browns quarterback situations, but the things that I can say are that A, Deshaun Watson is fully healthy entering the year, and that B, they have signed a pair of capable backups in case he sucks again or does get hurt, and my legend, my man, Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley. Like, again, all the Browns need is literally they just need average quarterback play to make their slew of weapons that they do have on the offensive side of the ball work, pretty much. In terms of those weapons too, it's surprising to say this, but it does look like Nick Chubb is coming back sooner than expected from that grueling knee injury he did have last year. But while he is still recovering from his horrible injury last fall, Cleveland has a stable core of Jerome Ford and Donta Freeman ready to work for weeks 1. To open opportunities for all of those running backs is a very talented offensive line, led by Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, and Ethan Pocket. As for receivers, it does seem like the Browns are out of the running for Brandon Ayuk, since we're still all just waiting to see what does happen with this dude, as we all just want to kind of just see him get signed at this point. But even with the core that they still do have, it still is pretty interesting to see what they can work with here. Led by Amari Cooper, Cleveland traded for Jerry Jeudy to complement Elijah Moore and last year's rookie breakout Cedric Tillman. On top of that, they also have one of the most underrated tight ends in football and fantasy football, for a matter of fact, in David Njoku. Like, this dude is a true warrior. I mean, he missed barely any time last year after getting severely burned in a bonfire accident. And I mean, top to bottom, if they had stability at quarterback, the Browns might have one of the best offenses in the AFC North. But as we flip to the defensive side of the ball, now that Aaron Donald has retired, I think it's safe to say that Myles Garrett is definitively the best defensive lineman in the NFL right now. And because of the way he needs to be covered, usually by 2 linemen, if not more, a lot of his supporting cast gets to punish opposing quarterbacks. Za'Darius Smith returned to fortify the defense along with Shelby Harris and Dalvin Tomlinson. The linebacking group is led by JOK, who is about to get top of the market money for his leadership, while Jordan Hicks and Devin Bush were brought in as free agents to help him out. And then we get to move to my favorite part of this defensive unit, which is the secondary, which I think bar none is the best secondary in the AFC North. Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit, and Juan Thornhill headline a group that conceded the second fewest passing yards in 2023. Top to bottom, the Browns have all the makings of a playoff team. Their defense is terrifying, and their weapons can make the corpse of Joe Flacco look like a Hall of Famer. Because of this, if Cleveland can get just slightly above average play from their $230 million quarterback, their ceiling is, as crazy as it sounds, like 12 wins, the same as the Bengals. However, there is a very real possibility that Watson is just completely washed, add in the unknown that Chubb's form after his injury is still uncertain, and the fact that Jeudy is a bit of a gamble as a wide receiver too, and I'm gonna give the fact that makes the Browns floor total like 7. Unsurprisingly now though, we have what I think is the football's weakest team inside of the AFC North, with that being of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who don't really even know who their starting quarterback is at this moment from all what we've seen in training camp. We kind of can assume it's going to be Russ, but there's still a toss-up that somehow maybe the running back that's a quarterback in Justin Fields might actually get a start. Like, why are people still thinking this guy is good at quarterback? Just make him a running back. But as we go back to last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers realized that Kenny Pickett wasn't the successor to Big Ben that they had hoped for, so they traded him and signed Russell Wilson for the vet min. And then, not even totally confident in him for the long term, or just maybe trying to light a fire under his ass, they traded for former first rounder Justin Fields, who has also shown flashes with the Chicago Bears, but as I said, never truly developed into a quarterback. Both quarterbacks have gotten first-team reps in training camp thanks to an injury to Russ, but while the Steelers are adamant that Wilson is their starter for week 1, we all know that the season could see both get real time under center.
Because when Russell Wilson was practicing, he didn't separate himself enough. He didn't show Mike Tomlin and that coaching staff that I'm the unquestioned starter on this team. Because if he had, Mike Tomlin would say, there's no quarterback competition. Russell Wilson is our starter. Simple.
So with that massive question at the most important position in football, how much can the rest of this Pittsburgh roster really elevate their quarterbacks? On offense, we have to start with the elephant in the room. And as of making this video right now, all the talk is that if the Steelers are going to be trading for 49ers wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. And if that does work out, Ayuk is a game changer who would fill the same role that DJ Moore did for Fields last year as a safety valve. As for existing pieces, the Steelers have done it again, developing George Pickens into a game-breaking threat and Calvin Austin into a very useful supporting piece. Pat Freiermuth is also a cheat code at tight end, and Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are both dangerous running backs, with Warren leading the league last year in missed tackles forced per attempt. And although people will argue who the true running back is in Pittsburgh, they've bolstered the offensive line, which should allow for both Najee and Jalen to thrive. They've gone all out. They drafted a left tackle and they added Zach Frazier at center in 2024, building on last year's first-round additions of Broderick Jones. Just like the Browns, the Steelers' defense can largely be defined as one superstar in his legion of weapons. TJ Watt is coming off another snub or near snub for Defensive Player of the Year and has a lot to prove. If he's able to stay healthy, he'll be right back to one of the meanest players in football, who's arguably getting more effective at getting to the quarterback than Myles Garrett is. For Watt's supporting staff, he still has Cameron Hayward, Alex Highsmith, and Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best all-around safeties in football. The team also benefits from the arrival of linebacker Patrick Queen, who betrayed the Ravens and signed with their division rival. And considering the fact that the Steelers do still have Mike Tomlin as their head coach, I'm going to break the cardinal rule here, and I'm going to say that their floor is not going to be a winning record, even though he has never not had a winning record. And before you all jump at me saying, well, he's never had a losing record while he's been a Steelers head coach. That's true, but he's also never had this amount of uncertainty on a Steelers roster also. Even when they did have Kenny Pickett at quarterback, as crazy as it sounds, they still knew who their quarterback was going to be for the season. And unless Russ is just going to go back to his prime form and have a one-off year of just having great stats and do something for the Steelers that they haven't had since Big Ben, then the whole headlines or all of the headlines this year are going to be, is Fields going to get a start and win? We saw the same thing happen when Mitchell Trubisky was the starter for the Steelers and everybody was begging for Kenny Pickett to start. And then we got to Kenny Pickett and then it was like, wow, let's get rid of Kenny Pickett. And it could be the same thing for Russell Wilson, is we're going to get to Russell Wilson throwing a bunch of interceptions. They're going to beg for Justin Fields to start. And then everybody's going to say, oh, it's the play calling that's the problem for Justin Fields. When it's not. The dude just can't throw the ball. Quit trying to make him a quarterback. Honestly, if they sit Russell Wilson at any point in this season to put Justin Fields in, the offense may be at the worst it's been in the past 10 years. Now, with that being said, the Steelers may win as few as 6 games this year, I think. The lowest floor in the AFC North. That being said, though, Mike Tomlin somehow does have some magic up his sleeve, always somehow. And there's a real chance that these variables work together somehow to make something of it. The defensive unit clicking would have to come first, but if Russ or Justin Fields work out at quarterback somehow and they figure it out quickly, they have the offensive personnel to be a real threat to good teams, especially if they can add Ayuk too. Because of these possibilities in the winning aurora of Mike Tomlin, the ceiling in Pittsburgh is 10 wins and another trip to the playoffs. Despite all that, though, every single team in the AFC North this year is going through changes, but the one thing that will always remain the same is that they love kicking the tar out of each other. I would be stunned if any team loses fewer than 2 divisional games in the regular season, because the AFC North is just going to be an absolute bloodbath in 2024. Now, the next division we're going to talk about is going to be the AFC South. The AFC South has always been thought of as one of the weakest until as of recent, with multiple rising stars inside of this division. And in today's video, we're going to go over each team's ceiling and floor, as well as what I fully expect to happen inside of this division and how possibly 3 teams from this division can make the playoffs. And on top of that as well, how all the quarterbacks in this division are going to be the future of the NFL. This is why the AFC South is the future of the NFL.
They've built this team to win right now with a quarterback who can play at a level with the Joe Burrows, with the Josh Allens, with the Lamar Jacksons, and yes, with the Patrick Mahomes when the time is right.
Stroud to his credit, feels like the anomaly of the one individual who's, 21, 22 years old, who could show up and lead men that are in their 30s, who could lead men that have been in the league forever, who could be a leader of a team and the captain of a team upon arrival coming out of college. That's not the norm.
That he's the type of player that can not only win a Super Bowl in the future, C.J. Stroud and them can win a Super Bowl this year.
Now, naturally, I just have to start off with the Houston Texans because it really seems like everything has been going right for them, who just executed maybe the greatest single season turnaround of all time. As we all know, CJ Stroud was everything the Texans could have wished for and more, and enters the 2024 season as a league-leading candidate in the MVP conversation. Then on top of Houston's success last season, they've had one of the best off seasons of any team in football, acquiring Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon to add 2 more big-name weapons on offense. Nico Autry, Al-Shaair, and Danielle Hunter to bolster down the defense. All of a sudden, Houston is one of the most well-rounded rosters in the NFL, and they're effectively taking advantage of Stroud's rookie contract to build what has the potential to be a superpower in 2024. And when I talk about juggernauts in the intro of this video, the Texans certainly deserve to be inside of that conversation now. And hell, even though it's going to piss some people off, as of right now, I really do think that they might have a better roster than Cincinnati and definitely than the Buffalo Bills. One of the most intriguing things about Houston's roster is their receiver room and how that will shape up with the addition of Diggs. There's no question that Stephon Diggs is a great wideout, but going into his age 31 season, is he still going to be the dominant X receiver that he once was in Minnesota and Buffalo? And as we look into last year, Diggs had under 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns, which isn't your typical disappointing season, but there's more to it when you look at the game-by-game basis. Through the first 6 weeks, Stephon was truly elite, averaging over 100 yards and nearly 1 touchdown per game, but after that, he completely fell off of a cliff, having less production by every metric through the back 11 games than he did through the first 6. And with that being said, we really don't know what was going on behind the scenes between Diggs and Allen. But he is in Houston now, and I think that he is certainly excited to be working with CJ Stroud in just this explosive offense now. I mean, athletically and technically, he can still be one of the best number 2 wideouts in the game, and I think he'll take on a similar role to D-Hop in Tennessee. I mean, however you want to look at it, Nico Collins at the 1, Diggs at the 2, and Tank Dell at the 3 is probably the best all-around pass catching unit in the league, hands down. And I mean, for all the credit that we do give to CJ Stroud last season because that dude was tremendous, we also have to give some credit to DeMeco Ryans, who also coached this team up just tremendously last year as well. Ryan's focus as a defensive-minded coach is helping Derek Stingley to become one of the brightest young corners in the game, and Will has so many young but also proven players, especially with Stroud being so beyond his years as a quarterback. The real question is now, though, can he take the next step in 2024 to lead Houston to the Super Bowl? I mean, the championship window is wide open, so it really comes all down to Stroud. Based on what we know now, I think that the absolute ceiling for this Texans team is 14 wins and the 1 seed in the AFC. I mean, they really are that good. As for the floor, I think 10 wins is the minimum, barring any crazy injuries to Stroud or other key players. But I mean, even worst case scenario, Houston will still be a playoff team this year. Next, we're going to talk about the Indianapolis Colts, who I believe to be the second best team in this division. And I mean, the consensus on Indy is all over the place though, because it comes down to what your opinion is on Anthony Richardson. Like, I mean, coming into the NFL, this dude really had like no experience playing football. He had like 18 games started or something like that in football from high school and college. But then he stepped onto the NFL field and he absolutely excelled at this level. The only problem he did have that was really noticeable, and as we all know, was just the lingering injuries and just constantly getting injured is what I should say. He started just 4 games last year and finished just 2 of them, but when he was on the field, he was absolutely electric. As potentially the greatest pure athlete to play the quarterback we've seen in recent years, Richardson possessed an even bigger threat as a runner than he did as a passer, but the passing game thrived with him under center as well. And now I know the sample size is very, very small from what we've seen from Richardson, even including this year's preseason, but it could mean big things for the future of the Colts. The big question going forward though is if Richardson's playstyle is sustainable. And don't get me wrong, he's definitely gonna have to tone down taking hits when he goes on like scrambles and can slide, but I mean, you don't want to take away what this kid can do in the run game because he is a freak of nature and needs to be used for what he's good at. Aside from AR though, the Colts have a pretty solid roster overall. In the draft, they selected Latu in the first round, and sorry if I did pronounce that name wrong. I do know that his first name is a little bit tough to to pronounce, but he was one of the most explosive pass rushers in all of football and should be able to make a huge impact alongside DeForest Buckner this season. They also added A.D. Mitchell, whose size and physicality will help bolster up the receiver room that already includes Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. The concerning position group for the Colts is at the corner spot, where Indy is lining up 2 second-year DBs on the outside in Jalen Jones and Juju Brents. The Colts gave up the 10th most points per game last year with 23.3 on average and allowed 3,800 passing yards and 21 touchdowns. Kenny Moore leads the unit, but the inexperience around him could be a major issue. They're also going to be starting third-year pro Nick Cross at strong safety over Rodney Thomas, who started 15 games at the position last season. It honestly seems like they've kind of gotten worse at what was already one of their worst positions going into this offseason, and weaknesses in the secondary can be easily exploited by opposing offenses. But overall, I mean, this team is super young, and I think that makes it just a really extremely volatile season that they could have this year. On one hand, if Anthony Richardson plays extremely well and lives up to that freak of nature, just kind of what we all think about him, then they could win a lot of games. But if he ends up becoming, you know, just the inexperienced quarterback because of only playing like 18 football games, then they're not going to be that successful. I really think that we could be looking at a 12-win ceiling for the Colts. Now, as I said though, this really could go badly also, and I think Indy could end up being a 7-win team. Personally, I believe that they will end up being closer to their total from last season, either like 9 or 10 wins in 2024, and they might be able to grab a wild card spot with the Texans taking the division. Now, next up though, we're going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are somewhat of an atypical team in the NFL right now. Normally when a team locks up their franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future, it means they've had a good amount of success with the quarterback running the team. That's not the case for the Jags and Trevor Lawrence, who has a career quarterback record of 20 and 30 through his first 3 NFL seasons. He did lead the Jaguars to a playoff win over the Los Angeles Chargers in the 2022 season, but ultimately fell short a week later in the divisional round against the Chiefs. But don't get me wrong, he's not really like a terrible or bad quarterback by any means. It's just that I don't really know if he's worth the 5-year, $275 million contract he just signed. To put things into perspective, his career stats are eerily similar to Daniel Jones. Yes, Daniel Jones of all people. And I mean, I don't think any other team would give a starting job right now, much less $200 million. The Jags also lost 2 of their leading wideouts in 2023 in Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones, who they did replace with rookie first-rounder Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis. Travis Etienne and Evan Ingram project to be the highest volume weapons in this offense, with Ingram potentially leading this team in receptions and targets as a tight end. The defense is highlighted by Josh Hines-Allen at edge, their biggest free agent pickup in Eric Armstead at defensive tackle, and Trayvon Walker, who still has a lot left to prove at the other edge spot. The back end of the defense is decent, but nothing special, with Andre Sisco and Darnell Savage at strong safety and free safety respectively, and a combination of Tyson Campbell and Rondell Darby at corner. I mean, their roster feels a lot more certain than the Colts, and thus I'd say it has a lower ceiling at 10 wins. Even if Brian Thomas becomes a great receiver in year 1, I still don't think the team has enough top-end talent on either side of the ball to want more than 10 wins this season, but they could certainly be set up for great success in the near future. If everything goes wrong for the Jags, however, I couldn't really see them falling lower than 7 wins either. While their floor is probably about the same as Indianapolis, the Colts have a lot more potential to be a contender this year. Which now brings me to my final team I want to talk about, and what I believe is the worst team in this division, in the Tennessee Titans. And now, before I explain why the Titans are the worst team in the division, I do want to point out some of the positive acquisitions they made this season, which included poaching Calvin Ridley from the Jaguars, bringing in Tony Pollard to man up the backfield with Tajay Spears, and Lloyd Cushenberry to lock up the center spot with the departure of Aaron Brewer. On defense, Tennessee brought in L'Jarius Sneed, who is undoubtedly a top 5 cornerback in football when healthy, and Chido Awuzie, who showed CB1 potential before an injury sidetracked his 2022 and 23 seasons. They also drafted JC Latham, who should finally seal up the left tackle spot that's been bothering Titans quarterbacks so much since Taylor Lewan's injury in 2019, and Tavondre Sweat, whose 6'4", 335-pound frame will plug in the middle of the defense as a traditional nose tackle. And you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of great additions that this team has made, so what makes them like possibly the worst team in this division, I think? And for starters, I mean, you're not wrong. That was a lot of great acquisitions that they did make this offseason, but I think the biggest thing, or the biggest factors that are going to make them struggle this year, is they have an unproven quarterback and an unproven head coach that honestly, I don't really believe in either one of them. Will Levis was 3-6 as a starter last year, and while he possesses all the tools to make an elite NFL quarterback, he wasn't quite able to put it all together last year. He seemed over aggressive at times, and his footwork and pocket presence have a lot of room for improvement, development, not to mention he needs to learn how to not take monstrous hits every game. Overall, Levis just isn't comfortable yet in an NFL offense, which is completely okay, and the hope is that he'll become much more comfortable this season, but he might not be leading his team to a division title. The other weak point I just mentioned was Brian Callahan, and while I do think eventually he may become a great head coach, this year, I just don't know if he has the talent and team around him, and on top of that, he's got a lot left to prove for himself. One of those things he still needs to do is call plays, something that he didn't get experience doing in Cincinnati and hasn't done yet in his career. I mean, I really like the scheme he's going to bring over from the Bengals, and it should fit really well with the Titans personnel, but he's probably going to have to take some time to get used to his new responsibilities. With that being said, I think the Titans have a ceiling of 10 wins also, considering they actually do have a good amount of high-end talent. However, their depth up front on both sides of the ball and at middle linebacker is severely lacking. And if Levis still doesn't get the hang of things while switching to an entirely new offense in year 2, it could be more of the same, which is why I believe the floor in 2024 is 6 wins, the same total that they had in 2023. Moving on from the AFC South now, I think we have one of the closest divisions inside of the AFC, with that being the AFC East. Now, in first place in the AFC East, I'm going to go with the New York Jets. That's right, the team that hasn't won the division title in over 2 decades. They've also not mustered up a winning season since 2015, but this situation is very different. This isn't your typical 3rd or 4th place team. It's been said countless times before in the runner-up to last season and this, but if Aaron Rodgers can offer competent quarterback play, which I'm sure he will, this team will be a real handful for any other teams in the NFL. The 2,919 yards gained and 268 points the New York Jets scored in 2023 was good enough for 30th and 29th in the NFL respectively. And I mean, I don't really need to sit here and tell you how horrendous those numbers are, but it really does also emphasize how good this defense was. Because the fact that the Jets delivered that offensive output and still managed to secure 7 wins is a massive testament to their incredible defensive effort. For the 2nd year in a row, the Jets defense was a top tier unit, giving up the 2nd fewest passing yards at just 168 per game. The Jets also gave up the 3rd fewest yards on the season, behind only Kansas City and Cleveland, and the good news is most of those guys responsible for that output are returning. Cornerback Sauce Gardner and linebacker Quincy Williams were both named to the first team All-Pro, and Quincy's brother Quinnen was selected to the Pro Bowl after another stellar season at defensive tackle. PFF put New York as the #1 defensive line linebacker unit in secondary in their preseason rankings, which tells you all you need to know about the rest of the talent littering this roster. Like, I mean, look, this is elite defense right here, and we should expect something very similar to what we saw last year from this defense. However, the biggest factor for this team, hands down, is going to be health. Primarily the health of Aaron Rodgers. Now age 40, Rodgers is more susceptible to injury than ever before, and another quarterback-less season for New York might finally prove too much for the defense, who have been wasted away so far. Now, of course, the plan is for Rodgers to remain upright for all 17 games of the regular season and beyond. And while his injury last year was a heartbreaker, it did at least come early enough for him to fully recover in time for this season. And I mean, let's be honest, no quarterback was going to win behind that atrocious offensive line last year. This year, though, the Jets have addressed the issue head on, bringing in Tyron Smith from Dallas at left tackle, as well as Morgan Moses and John Simpson from Baltimore.
The addition of Moses at right tackle allows Elijah Vera Tucker, who's their young and promising and talented offensive lineman, to play right guard. Right. But they all have to play and stay healthy.
They have also drafted Olu Fashanu to produce a far more talented and deeper unit than ever before.
Pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Olu Fashanu, tackle, Penn State.
And honestly, that's going to be music to the ears of Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, who have been crying out for offensive competence so that way they can properly unleash their truly elite talent. And look, I mean, if the offensive line can hold up and keep Aaron Rodgers upright, then there's no reason that Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson can't have all-pro years this year because of the output that Aaron Rodgers is going to help them have. And I mean, in that scenario, the Jets ceiling is sky high. We already know the defense is going to be good, and if the offense can match, then I'd put the Jets ceiling at a whopping 14 wins. For their floor, I am going with 11, and I know that might seem high, but this team secured 7 wins with Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle. Again, all my projections are based on quarterbacks staying healthy, and in that instance, I don't see Rodgers nabbing less than 11 wins for this team. Now, the next team up for me is Miami, coming off of honestly a weird 2023 campaign in which they started absolutely on fire, only to fizzle out in embarrassing fashion in the cold winter weather. And okay, I know it wasn't only the cold that got to them, with several brutal injuries catching up with the team on defense, but you can't deny that this team has some playoff issues to get over. Like, I mean, they were frankly completely unstoppable with Mike McDaniel's confusing pre-snap motions, combining with Tyreek Hill's speed and Tua's quick release to deliver knockout blows before most teams had even got off the bus. However, once defenses started to adjust to this, the points for Miami began to dry up. This season, they've added even more speed to the equation in the form of Jalen Wright, the exciting running back rookie out of Tennessee.
With the 120 pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Jalen Wright, running back, Tennessee.
And I mean, this gives Mike McDaniel an embarrassment of riches to work with. And you know that he will have cooked up some wild and wacky play designs to get all his guys in space. And look, there's no which way around it. Mike McDaniel is the key to this Miami team being successful. Like, he's going to have to maximize each player's strength in order to make sure that Miami can have the most amount of wins that they're capable of. But with that being said, also, this team's cold weather issues are well documented as well. Tua's 0-3 in games under 50 degrees at kickoff, and the Dolphins in general are 2-20 from their last 22 games in such conditions. Like, I think it's safe to say, to give the Dolphins the best chance of winning their first playoff game since 2000, they need home field advantage. And to get home field advantage, the offense is going to have to do something special, because this defense definitely has its problems. Not only did their superstar defenders Christian Wilkins depart in free agency, but Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, the team's premier pass rushers, are both coming off of serious injuries and are likely going to miss time at the beginning of the season. The pass rush also took another hit when Andrew Van Ginkel departed and when new signing Shaquille Barrett decided to retire out of nowhere just a couple months before the season started. And like, I mean, even with rookie edge defender Chop Robinson in the building, this D-line is completely depleted, and who knows what form Chubb and Phillips will return in after their injuries. Thankfully, the pass rush deficiencies are made up for by excellence in the secondary, with Jalen Ramsey leading a very talented group. Kendall Fuller and Jordan Poyer have come in to bolster the already talented ranks, joining Javon Holland, who has been rock solid at safety ever since he joined the team in 2021. And like, I mean, if Phillips and Chubb can return quickly and play at the high level that they were at, this Dolphins side is in for a serious force to be reckoned with. I honestly think that they are the team best placed to take it, so I'm giving them a ceiling of 13 wins. However, if the D-line does struggle, that will trickle down to the secondary, and we saw how that ended last year. I still think that the offense would be good enough to get 10 wins, but we know that this team needs the home field advantage, and I'm not sure 10 wins is going to get them that. Now, in third place, though, we have another team that needs to get over the hump, but a different kind of hump. Buffalo hasn't had any problems going deep into the playoffs in recent years, but they haven't yet managed to find that missing piece to get them into the big game. Unfortunately, this is not the year that they get the job done in my estimation either. They're going to be my third place team, which I even feel more strongly about now given the fact that Matt Milano had a recent injury. But it's all not doom or gloom for the Bills though. Their defensive line remains formidable with talents like Greg Russia, Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, Ed Oliver, and Daquan Jones leading the charge. The secondary too still benefits from the services of Rasul Douglas, Taylor Rapp, and Christian Benford. Like, I mean, there is talent there for sure, but the loss of seasoned veterans like Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, and Leonard Floyd still definitely have to hurt a lot. The promotion of Bobby Babich to defensive coordinator is another key storyline too. He's proven his worth as the team's linebacker coach over recent years, but the top job comes with its own set of challenges. While Babich's unit should still be above average, it may take some time to fully adjust to these changes in personnel both on and off the field. But that's the thing though, is it's not just the defense that lost key figures also. With Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis now going to other AFC rivals, Josh Allen has a much less enticing group of pass catchers to work with, such as Khalil Shakir, who does look like the talented guy out of the slot, and Dalton Kincaid is a fantastic breakout candidate at tight end, but I don't see who wins downfield for Josh Allen. And sure, I'm sure that he can do a lot of things with his legs, and even with James Cook standing next to him, a lot of that stuff can happen with just those two guys right there. there. But I really just think that the loss of those two guys that just honestly would always win downfield is going to be a major loss and take a really big toll on the Bills this year. Those issues are compounded even further by the injury to Curtis Samuel, who is week to week with a turf toe. And I mean, I like the signing and think that he can be another receiving option who can help out, but the injury to start the season is far from ideal, and he fits the mold of another guy who will do most of his damage on short and intermediate routes. The guy that's tasked with winning downfield, though, is going to be rookie Keon Coleman, but I will believe that when I see it. Yes, he can make brilliant contested catches, but winning with physicality doesn't always translate to the NFL. I mean, honestly, he's not an effective separator at all, and I have serious doubts about what he can offer Josh Allen as a serious downfield target. I mean, fundamentally, when Josh Allen needs to throw a ball deep downfield, who's going to be his go-to guy? Are they just going to rely on throwing a jump ball up to Keon Coleman and hoping he comes up with it? Because I don't really see that working out a lot this year. I mean, it used to be Diggs that they could rely on, but I really don't see a solid replacement that's going to fill that gap so far. And I mean, hopefully Keon Coleman can prove me wrong and develop into that receiver this year, but I mean, I just really don't see the separation that he's going to get, but again, maybe he'll prove me wrong. And then, I mean, when you combine that with the departures on defense, I'm going to give the Bills a ceiling of 10 wins. They're not completely out of the equation, mainly because of Josh Allen at quarterback, but I think this is the first time in 5 years that they won't win the division title. On top of that, their floor I think is going to be around 8 wins. I know it's a small variance, but Josh Allen is just so good that he can pinch a few wins and elevate the floor on his own. Now, in 4th place in an otherwise fairly competitive AFC East, we have the New England Patriots. I mean, in this new era of the Patriot way, it's hard to see how they don't finish in 4th place, to be honest. I mean, despite the low expectations, this season is going to be pivotal for the Patriots, primarily because of their new quarterback, Drake May. The last few years of quarterback rotation have been painful and led to some dismal outings, so fans will be desperate to see May settle in nicely. And I think it's easy to argue that May should be out there right away because that's what I believe, honestly, and I think that he should be out there day one, but I'm going to argue from the other side right now just to try and prove a point that there's also a side of maybe sitting him for the whole year, or at least most of the year, and letting him develop on his own when they can, kind of in garbage time and through practice and watching Jacoby Brissett play. I mean, at 21 years old, the last thing that this team should do is dent his confidence and instill bad habits. I mean, he doesn't have exactly the most exciting of offenses to work with Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, and Pop Douglas. And I mean, honestly, that's just an intriguing group on paper, but that's only if they hit their potential. And at the same time, the more likely scenario is that the lack of dynamic weapons becomes a constant talking point throughout the season. An even bigger issue, though, is how terrible this offensive line is, though. Like, it is horrendous. They're ranked 28th in PFF's preseason offensive line rankings, and the preseason showings have been far from convincing. A lack of protection for a rookie quarterback who's trying to adjust to the speed of the NFL while also playing with rookie wide receivers sounds like an absolute recipe for disaster. The Patriots should get a look at their guy, but only when he's ready and the situation is right. The defense is comfortably the better unit entering the 2024 season, but some preseason hiccups have dented the outlook somewhat. Christian Barmore, the very talented up-and-coming defensive tackle, received a very scary diagnosis of blood clots recently, which has thrown his 2024 season status up in the air. It appears that there is a very real chance that he will miss the year. And I mean, obviously the hope is that he recovers fully, and we can all just really be thankful that the doctors caught the issue in time, but the on-field impact will be significant for New England. Barmore broke out in 2023 to the tune of the team leading 8.5 sacks, and he had just signed a 4-year, $84 million extension. The pass rush then took another hit when Matthew Judon was traded to the Atlanta Falcons, and I mean, Judon has been New England's best defensive player over the recent years. He registered 28 sacks across the 2021 and 2022 seasons before a season-ending injury scuppered the 2023 season. Even then, he managed to log 4 sacks in just 4 games played. Like, I mean, he's going to be another big loss on the defensive line, and they will now be praying that the sophomore breakout for Keon White comes true. Another second-year player to watch is Christian Gonzalez, the team's first-round cornerback from the 2023 draft. He got off to a great start as a rookie before getting injured. Hopefully he can return to similar form and headline a talented secondary along with safety Jabril Peppers and cornerback Jonathan Jones. And I mean, honestly, this is just going to be really fascinating to see how the Patriots handle this whole thing now that this being the first season without Bill Belichick on the sidelines. And honestly, I think it really opens up their results of how bad or how good they can be this year because he's no longer there. There are some talented players on offense and on the defensive side of the ball, but overall, I really do think that the big name departures and just the change of scheme are still going to have an effect on this team this year. Then on offense, who really knows how good or how bad they can be? They have a bunch of rookies and young talent on that side of the ball, but again, it really just comes down to how good or how bad that offensive line is, because Drake May, as we've seen in the preseason, looks fantastic, but on the other end too, the offensive line has just looked horrendous. So I really do think it comes down to quarterback play to see the results of this team. Honestly, I put their ceiling at 6 wins and their floor at 2, which means they are in with a good shot at another top draft pick in the 2025 draft. Are you looking for a new book this football season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest and easiest payouts in the industry, along with 24/7 personalized service 365 days a year. Not only that, but they have live wagering on all major games, so if you see something mid-game and want to make a wager on it, you can. And the best part is you get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And now look, you guys know I had to come through for you, so use my sign up link in the description or pinned comment and get a sign up bonus of 125% up to $2,000. Again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, but for now, let's hop back into it. Not long ago, the AFC West looked like it might be the best division in football. Russell Wilson had just been traded to the Broncos, setting up a mouth-watering race for the division title between him, Justin Herbert, and Patrick Mahomes. Unfortunately, as we all know, it didn't turn out that way. Like, not at all. Russ turned out to be the worst trade in NFL history, and the Chargers continued on their frustrating trend of mediocrity. As we all know, the Chiefs held up their end of the bargain, continuing with what appears to be an unstoppable dynasty. However, with Bo Nix in Denver and Jim Harbaugh in LA, is this division finally on the road to recovery? And while I do fully expect that the AFC West is going to be a lot closer than many people think this division is going to be, I still fully have the Chiefs delivering with what everybody thinks they're going to do in 2024, and I'm hoping that they can achieve the three-peat. I do get it. Last year was a struggle, but a Super Bowl title still emerged from their campaign. And I mean, to be honest, that is frankly terrifying for the rest of the NFL because this offense was painful to watch. It was a different type of team from the Chiefs that we had seen, and it was the defense that bailed Mahomes out for once, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the same story again in 2024. After watching Sky Moore underperform and Kadarius Toney test out how many different ways he can make a mistake, the Chiefs decided it was about time they got their $500 million man some weapons. Marquise Hollywood Brown arrived in free agency, and Xavier Worthy arrived via the draft. They joined sophomore wideout Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce, instantly upgrading this offense from a Ford Focus in 2023 to a red-hot Ferrari in 2024. I mean, like, to be frank, this is a dream offense for Mahomes, whose 7 yards per attempt placed him below the league average last year. He now has 2 truly dangerous deep threats in Worthy and Brown, while also benefiting from another exciting talent in Rice to go get targets underneath. And then when you add in some Kelce magic and Pacheco out of the backfield, you have dangerous weapons all over the place for arguably the best quarterback in NFL history. Like, if that's not scary, then I don't know what is. On top of that, I don't expect this defense to really fall off from their elite status either. Yes, L'Jarius Sneed heading to Tennessee wasn't really ideal, but it was a necessary sacrifice to ensure that the ultimate disruptor, Chris Jones, stayed in the building. Jones is the spearhead of a lethal defensive line with Nick Bolton swarming over the middle and Trent McDuffie leading a young and talented secondary. McDuffie is absolutely in a position to break out and solidify his status as one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, which will soften the blow of Sneed's departure for sure. With Steve Spagnuolo pulling the strings on defense and Andy Reid masterminding this offense, it's hard to see any other team as the favorite for the Super Bowl title this year. I mean, honestly, the biggest thing that seems to be the issue for this team is just having the pressure of everybody expecting them to go and three-peat this year. Like, everybody knows that they're going to make the playoffs, so now the question really just becomes, can they achieve that greatness and just kind of have this success at the beginning of the season this year? It's really during that time at the beginning of the season that we might also see them get creative with their game plans and lighten the load on Kelce, ensuring they are as prepared as possible for the postseason. I mean, honestly, I could see a couple of games slipping away from them, but they will stay my heavy favorite for the division title, and I put their ceiling at 14 wins and their floor at 10. Second in the AFC West, I'm going to have to put the LA Chargers, who returned to that spot after a dismal last place outing in 2023. After persistent failures from the Brandon Staley regime, the Chargers made the smart decision of bringing in a guy who absolutely knows how to win, Jim Harbaugh. I mean, the reality is that this team needed a complete culture change. They had become renowned for coming up small in the biggest of moments, and Harbaugh's complete overhaul is exactly what they needed. And look, I think the biggest takeaway that we're going to see from this team this year is that they've been equipped and kind of brought in players to make sure that they can run the damn ball. And I know you've probably heard it 100 times, or I mean, so many times this offseason, but it's very, very true. Greg Roman is in as offensive coordinator. The 5th overall pick was spent on a behemoth offensive lineman. The top 2 wide receivers were sent packing, and the primary free agent additions were 2 ex-Raven running backs and 2 blocking tight ends. Everyone knows what they're doing, and you can't blame them for going in that direction. Jim Harbaugh has an NFL regular season record of 44-19-1 and was heartbreakingly close to winning the Super Bowl. The question really becomes, how long is it going to take for them to turn this team around then? This team could only muster 5 wins in 2023, and on top of that, in the offseason, they saw a lot of talent leave this room. And truly, I think a lot will ride on the performance of the offensive line. It sure looks like Harbaugh got a good one in Joe Alt, potentially creating the best tackle duo in the NFL when you factor in Rashawn Slater on the other end of the line. But you really never know with rookies, and there is another new face at center with Bradley Bozeman coming in to replace Corey Linsley. And Harbaugh will be hoping that this line can click instantly, which is going to be essential if his run-oriented and efficient passing attacks are going to work. And even when they do look to turn the ball, they have one of the best talents in the NFL at quarterback. Simply put, Justin Herbert is an absolute stud, but he has had almost all of his playmakers stripped away from him now. To make up for it, the Chargers drafted Ladd McConkey, a rapid receiver out of Georgia, who is one of the best route runners in the draft. McConkey does lack size, but he makes up for it by getting open with ease. I fully expect he and Josh Palmer should be regular targets when Herbert does drop back to pass, with the team hoping to then see any signs of life, which it's kind of scary to see Quentin Johnston dropping so many passes in training camp, but they're going to be hoping that last year's first rounder in Quentin Johnston can turn it around this year. On defense though, the Chargers opted to keep both Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, despite them being 29 and 33-year-olds respectively. This is another nod toward the run game and defensive strategy, and there is no doubt that both can be dangerous if they stay healthy. Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin James, and Gilman then lead a secondary that is desperately in need of a bounce back after conceding the 30th most passing yards in 2023 with 4,246. And while there are definitely gaps on the roster, Charger fans have to feel great about their prospects. Jim Harbaugh is a serious football guy, and this team now has an identity. If their offensive line can click and dominate early, and Edwards and Dobbins can thrive, I can see this team easily hitting 10 wins, if not more. However, if Alt takes time to adjust and the wide receiver depth just becomes a problem, in addition to Mack and Bosa showing their age, I could see this team having a floor of around 6 wins. Now, 3rd place for me goes to the Denver Broncos, and honestly, I could even see them trying to make a push to get 2nd place in this division. Their roster is littered with solid but not spectacular players, and without many high-profile offseason moves to get excited about. Simply put though, the elephant in the room on that front is the $53 million in dead cap they are swallowing this season in order to get Russell Wilson out of the building. This takes their total dead cap up to over $70 million. They have another $32 million from the Wilson deal with next year, so this feels like a team who are treading water as they wait for that to pass. They're not quite fully committing to a full rebuild, but also not exactly posing a threat as a Super Bowl contender either. They're almost in limbo. I think the primary goal for this season is to ensure that Bo Nix is just really given every possible opportunity to succeed and give this fan base a glimmer of hope. Thankfully, the presence of some very talented veterans at key positions gives Nix something to work with, suggesting this shouldn't be a situation like the one Bryce Young faced last year. Garrett Bowles, Mike McGlinchey, and the rest of the O-line are unlikely to improve to become a top 10 unit in 2024, but they are also not among the worst in the league. All in all, they should be able to keep Nix up on his feet and give him enough time to process his reads and adjust to the speed of the game. Nix will also be supported by a solid run game, with Javonte Williams likely to see improvements now that he is another year removed from injury. And Jaleel McLaughlin offered some much needed explosiveness. At wide receiver, Courtland Sutton provides a reliable, big body target on the outside for Nix to aim at, while Josh Reynolds brings a valuable veteran presence. Beyond them, the Broncos have intriguing upside in Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, who will be hoping to develop into explosive weapons downfield. Franklin in particular has a strong rapport with Nix, having thrived together at Oregon, and while it isn't a receiving core that will frighten defenses too much, there is at least something for Nix to work with. The other good news for Bo Nix is, he has one of the greatest offensive minds in Sean Payton on his side. Payton and frankly just the whole NFL community has compared Nix to Drew Brees, with the young quarterback showing similar tendencies as a decisive, quick, and accurate passer. I really expect Payton to just really keep it simple for Nix, and so long as he can be well protected and supported by his offense, he should be able to move the ball well from day one. Even as we've seen in the preseason, this dude looked good. On defense, Patrick Surtain is the one surefire stud, headlining a defense that is likely to struggle again after losing the likes of Justin Simmons, Josie Jewell, and Kareem Jackson. John Franklin Myers was the big ticket addition to the defensive line, but he was only available because he struggled to break through with the Jets. I mean, there is serviceable talent throughout the defense, but it feels dangerously light on game changers, which suggests Nix could be playing from behind a fair bit. On the whole, results come behind Bo Nix's development as a top priority this year. Like, I mean, this team was really always going to struggle with over $70 million in dead cap, so focusing on simply helping Nix adjust to life in the NFL has to be the goal. If he hits the ground running as his experience in college suggests he should, then I think he will fill the fan base up with hope. With the playmakers at his disposal, I think a good rookie season from Nix could lift them to a ceiling of 9 or 10 wins. However, there is a scenario where he struggles, and with the defense also expected to be pretty vulnerable, I place their floor at about 5 wins. Are you looking for a new book this football season? BetUS is the answer. They have the fastest and easiest payouts in the industry, along with 24/7 personalized service 365 days a year. Not only that, but they have live wagering on all major games, so if you see something mid-game and want to make a wager on it, you can. And the best part is you get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. And now look, you guys know I had to come through for you, so use my sign up link in the description or pinned comment and get a sign up bonus of 125% up to $2,000. Again, thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video, but for now, let's hop back into it. Now in last place in the AFC West, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, they have some of the most interesting moves this offseason, most notably bringing in defensive tackle Christian Wilkins. And I mean, after a stellar start to his career in Miami, Wilkins signed with the Raiders for a whopping $100 million over the next 4 years. His presence next to Max Crosby instantly makes the Raiders defensive line a very dangerous proposition. Crosby is a menace coming off of the edge and is a perennial defensive player of the year contender. He notched 14.5 sacks last year and will now combine with Wilkins, who had 9 sacks at defensive tackle, to terrorize quarterbacks. And I mean, they're gonna need to do that too, because their division has some really good quarterbacks too, in the likes of Mahomes, Herbert, and even Bo Nix if he pans out. On top of that, Robert Spillane is coming off of a sensational season at linebacker, and Jack Jones looks like he's ready to break out as an elite corner, meaning this defense does have exciting playmakers in every unit. They still have a lot of gaps to fill, but I mean, this unit is starting to come together really nicely. The bigger question marks for sure have to come on the offensive side of the ball for this team. For now, Gardner Minshew has been named the starter at quarterback, but there have to be some question marks about how long he's gonna hold on to the job for. And I mean, yes, he did a great job in Indianapolis last year and he almost propelled them into the playoffs, but I think a lot of credit has to go to Shane Steichen's scheme for that. Minshew will at least benefit from having some very exciting weapons on offense. Devontae Adams, I mean, he's still a stud at receiver, and the selection of Brock Bowers at pick 13 all but guarantees a lot of 12 personnel action for the Raiders. Bowers and last year's second round pick Michael Mayer are an intriguing tight end pairing with the potential to create serious mismatches for the Raiders. Jacoby Myers remains a useful wide receiver too, and Trey Tucker hopefully developing into a bigger role this year as well. With the offensive line fitting into the not good or not bad category and Zamir White looking promising at running back, there is potential for solid offensive play this year, but I mean, I honestly think that the quarterback is going to be the problem with this team. And I mean, like, if anybody watched the wide receiver show on Netflix called Receiver, everybody saw how frustrated Devontae Adams was during that show. And if things don't start off well at the beginning of this year, I could see a lot of the same things happening again this season. And I mean, if that does happen, and I mean, in that scenario, I could see really Las Vegas shipping him off for just a haul of picks to, I don't know, maybe the Jets or somebody that needs a receiver by the deadline, and they just get a haul of picks and maybe even an early pick in the draft to go and try and get a quarterback from next year's draft class too. I mean, on Saturday, Moss looked really good. Like, that dude might win the Heisman, so I could easily see them trying to go and get him if he does keep up with that kind of play. For the coaching position though, Antonio Pierce certainly brought good vibes last year and inspired some late season wins, but I mean, he lacks coaching experience, and I feel like this team could be on the brink of a fall. I honestly have their ceiling at 6 wins and their floor at like 3. So maybe this time next year, we're prepping for the 2025 season with Las Vegas' shiny new quarterback at the helm. All in all though, I personally think that the Chiefs are going to run this division again this year. Like, I mean, I think they're just going to easily run away with it. I mean, they've been dominating it for like the past like 4 or 5 years, while Mahomes has been the quarterback. So I fully expect that to happen again this year. I'm hoping that Bo Nix does become a great quarterback though. Like, he's looked great in the preseason. If he can carry that over into the regular season, then maybe he's the CJ Stroud of this year. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see. But as always, give me your record predictions down low of who you think is going to win this division, who's going to become in last place in this division. And also, if you guys have not, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the video. If you can, share it with somebody that loves the NFL. We are 4 days away, so make sure you guys are sharing it and like and comment and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.